As we continue our lesson here, the heart of the volunteer leader, we will be discussing in the second lesson communication and cross-cultural context. And sometimes, like I've said in our first week's lesson, we talked about people can speak the same language and not understand each other, and people don't have to speak the same language but can understand each other. And so growing up as a kid, I would play with the Kitty Catchy children. They would speak their language, I would speak English, but there were times and moments that we understood each other. We could communicate in a way that was comprehensible so that we could play the game or do things together and have fun. But sometimes in communication, we speak in the same language, especially with volunteers. I might be saying cow, somebody might be thinking monkey, and so there's a break in communication dialogue. And when this happens, a volunteer leader has to be sensitive to the comprehension of the volunteers and what he is saying. And if they don't understand, he needs to make sure that they do understand. And there have been times when I would explain something to the group and nobody's understood, so I would try to re-say it in a different way, but one person gets it. And then that person, all of a sudden excited, explains everything I said, but in his own way, and everybody else got it. And so working with Brazilians, I didn't have much contact with the Brazilians until I was 15. I didn't start speaking Portuguese until I was 15 because of my hearing impairment, and I was only in the tribe for 3 to 6 months straight at a time, and my contact with the Brazilian population was very minimal. It was such that my wife made this interesting observation. She said, "Dennis, you are in your skin in the tribe, in your skin with the English-speaking people, but with the Brazilians, you have a little more difficulty relating to them." And so sometimes in our communication and not having the relationships built sometimes makes it difficult to connect with people. And with some of my volunteers, I had developed projects and activities over 2 to 3 months periods of time where we've developed a language where we are able to discuss things in very minimal words, but we understand each other. And so as new volunteers come on, they don't understand that, and they want to have the same dynamic speed and connectivity that only takes time because you have to construct a cultural language in your volunteers so that you guys understand what is being said in a way that things flow. There's a lot of fluidity in what you're doing. So as we read in Acts 13:4-5, we see that Paul and Barnabas are on their first missionary trip, and they took John as their helper. And then in Acts 15:36-40, we see that Paul said to Barnabas, "Let's go and visit our brothers, the ones that we had contact with before, and see how they're doing." And then Barnabas thought it was a great idea. He said, "Let's take John Mark," and Paul said no because he deserted him on the way in the first trip, and they had a sharp disagreement, and they parted ways. But then as you read 2 Timothy 4:11, you see Paul saying, "Bring John Mark, he is useful to me in the ministry." And so Paul's being wise was not wrong, but Barnabas' belief in the least likely people was also not wrong. And there lies the tension in de-escalating tense problem so that they don't get to the point where they snap. And in working with volunteers, whenever there's a tension, as a leader, you need to de-escalate problems and deal with them in a more timely manner and address it in a more of an appropriate time so that you do not create shame. If you embarrass people in public, especially indigenous, you are not de-escalating problems, but you're actually creating or throwing gasoline on a fire and causing situations to be more aggravated is the wrong approach. And so communication is very vital and important in cross-cultural context as we build relationships and as we grow with people. As I disciple and work with the volunteers in Brazil, I have noticed that some volunteers come in and they have this attitude where they are dominant and they want to lead. And that is something that needs to be very, very defined, because wherever there are two heads, there's confusion. Paul and Barnabas were two heads. They had two different ideas, they had two different ways they wanted to do something, and who was the boss? Who was the one that was going to lead it? And Paul wanted to do it one way, Barnabas wanted to do it another, and they could not come into an agreement. And so when that happened, there's a break in the leadership, and the best thing is you have a good conversation, de-escalate the situation, say, hey, I feel like this is what God is directing me and leading me to. This is what I'm gonna do. This is what I think God's telling me to do, and I respect what you wanted, but you don't agree with me. But I think I need to do it this way. And so Paul takes a group of people that he's more connected with, and both of them are anointed. Both of them have the anointing. Both of them are called. And Barnabas went another way, and Paul went in another direction. And so when these dominant people come in and they want to start taking over and having more reign and control, I've had to advise my coordinators, regional directors that, hey, when you go, do not let the person lead you without visiting a tribe, making and establishing contact with the chief, so that when any problem arises, they know who they're dealing with. So an important element in the chain communication command chain, the chain of communication, I forget how to say it because of English and Portuguese, but the command chain communication, whatever way I want to say it, forgive me. There are channels of communication that need to go through the right processes. And when somebody puts themselves in between and passes information to people that should know and they don't end up knowing, creates a break in harmony, and it causes damaged relationship, and it causes things to go off track. So one time this volunteer was depending on this other volunteer, the coordinator that's connected with me, was dependent on this other volunteer's direction and indication. She hadn't visited the tribe, she hadn't talked to the chief, and she didn't talk to the person that was the middle person between the tribe, the chief, and this volunteer. So if anything goes wrong, she could not get to the bottom of it. So I said, do not commit until you go to the tribe, you establish a line of communication directly with the chief, and you know who's sitting at the table with you, so that if problems arise, you know who you're dealing with, and they know who they're dealing with, and the people that I don't know who is on the inside doesn't cause problems that later comes back and underscores the position and leadership of the people that I am working with directly in my communication with them. So communication is something that is very essential, and if anything gets out of alignment and a misunderstanding, miscommunication, it causes everything to become unclear, it causes chaos, it causes confusion, and it can literally damage the effort of the ministry that's trying to be done, so that you are ineffective. So to be an effective leader, you have to take care to make sure that the communication lines are functioning, and you know who the lines are connected to, who's who, who's what, in your position as a leader that you need to know that everything that goes through issues, situations, or problems, they land at your table so that you can address it, because you need to address all the problems. So, in the activity that we'll be doing, we'll be role-playing a scenario involving cross-cultural misunderstanding and discuss how to navigate it with humility.